We all want more freedom, and a lot of us work hard now in the hope we'll feel free later. What if there was another way? A way to feel happier, more free, and confident to get better results right now. Welcome to Your Freedom Unlimited, where we share practical stories and strategies to help you show up authentically, drop your fears, and take inspired action on what matters most to you. I'm your host, Jen Ramsey. As a coach with a love for metaphysics, science, spirituality, and strategies that get results, I'll help you step away from self-doubt and create a powerful new story for your life, business, or career. Join me. Hey everyone, Jen Ramsey here with Your Freedom Unlimited. Today we're going to be talking about anxiety relief. Is it possible to get relief from anxiety and overwhelm? And how can a change in your personal frequency help? Well, I am so excited to share with you today's episode because we're going to be taking a very deep dive into this thing called frequency and how it can not only relieve anxiety, but also give us a fresh new lease on life so we can start to do what matters most to us. And that's what this podcast is all about, helping you move through whatever you need to move through so you can do what matters most to you right now. So this thing called frequency, what is it? Well, it's all around us. Frequency, it's about, when I'm talking about frequency, I'm talking about vibration, and emotional energy and frequency is something that we would probably tap into when we think of this. So have you ever met someone, say at a meeting or perhaps even at a party, and felt instantly at ease with them, but then met another person who didn't feel so good at all, that just didn't feel great to be around? What we're doing here is we're picking up on that person's personal energy and vibration, or their frequency. And while we might feel that vibe from others, that frequency from others, our personal frequency, so the frequency that we hold, is just as important. And it's time to get conscious about it. Because what I've learned is that when I'm conscious about my vibration or my emotional frequency, then it's really going to determine the experiences that I have and then the overall quality of my life. I guess you could say that I think that emotional frequency is everything, and I mean everything with a capital E. So why am I talking about this? It's because it's something that we can do something about. I know for a long time I was probably quite asleep to this, and I didn't realize that it was something that I could do something about, but it is certainly inside of our control and we can do something about it. And what I've noticed is, and what the literature also says, is that the better we feel more consistently, the better experience we will have of life. That might sound like a really big call, but I have found it to be absolutely the case when it came to my experience with anxiety and with so many other things in my life. Because when I realized I could make a conscious shift in my vibration, everything changed. So before I go into how I got anxiety relief from a shift in my frequency, let me just take a minute to give you some of the science behind this principle. So in summary, everything around us, ourselves, animals, plants, water, are made of tiny vibrating atoms that receive, store, and emit electromagnetic energy. And when I say vibrations, I'm referring to the oscillating or vibrating movement of atoms and particles caused by that electrical energy. So even solid items like a chair has some vibration. And then our tissues, our cells, our organs, our emotions, and our thought patterns all have an electromagnetic field that's unique to them. So this thing called frequency is measured in what's called Hertz units. And the measurement is done at the rate at which those vibrations and oscillations occur. So these can be either fast or slow. So an atom vibrating at a fast rate is at a higher frequency than one vibrating at a much slower rate. The late Bruce Tanio was a researcher and developer in this space, and he developed something called Tanio technology. And what he found was that a healthy body resonates at a frequency of 62 to 72 megahertz. And that when the body's frequency drops to 58 megahertz, that is when the disease starts. He also found that bacteria, viruses, and diseases each have their own low frequency that can influence your energy field. Pretty interesting in these COVID-19 times. Something that I'd like to talk about in the future, but I think right now I'd like to focus more on how our emotional energy can affect us. And speaking of that, more work on emotional vibration was done by Dr. David Hawkins. He wrote a great book called Power versus Force, and he found that various emotions resonate at different levels. What he did was he set a logarithmic scale of 1 to 1,000, and he used applied kinesiology to test levels of human emotion in the body. And his findings were amazing. He found that low-level emotions like shame, guilt, and fear resonated on his scale at a low level of about around 20 to 50. He found that courage resonated at 200, love at 500, and enlightenment at 1,000. He even developed what he called a map of consciousness that shows this scale. And I'll put a copy of that map in the show notes to this episode, so please go and have a look at that there. Just one more little piece of science before I bring all of this together. What's important in all of this is also that like attracts like. And two American researchers, Hunt, a philosopher, and Schooler, a professor of neuroscience from the University of California in Santa Barbara, have recently found in their paper, The Easy Part of the Hard Problem, a resonance theory of consciousness, that when different oscillating things are close together for a time, they begin to vibrate in sync. And they say this applies to neurons in the brain, to fireflies gathering, the moon and the earth, and much more. And again, I'll put a link to their paper in the show notes. But in a nutshell, what does all of this mean? It means that everything around us is made of vibrating matter, and that when we come into contact with someone else, we can begin to vibrate in sync with them. And I think if we just think about our experience of life, what Hunt and Schooler are saying is exactly right. Just think of that moment, when someone walks into the room and they like a dark storm, and their energy, you can almost feel the energy bringing you down. Or on the flip side, when someone who is very upbeat and fun walks into the room, everyone feels great, and it's almost like a light switch is turned on in the room. That's what we're talking about. And we, as human beings, we pick up this energy really quickly, and we do it almost unconsciously until we can become conscious ourselves of where our energy can take us. So when we put all of this together, what does it mean? It means we really need to be aware of our frequency or our emotions, because they're going to impact the results that we get, not only in the moment, but overall in our life. And the second thing we need to be aware of is that we can consciously choose our frequency. The best thing to do here is we need to focus on feeling as good as we can most of the time. And my observation in all of this is that in our society, we're conditioned to look for problems, and we're pretty used to feeling not so good about things. We're pretty used to putting on the coat of suffering. And I guess what I'm wanting to share with you today is that there is an opportunity here for us to turn all of this around. If we want to feel better, we can do so. We are not slaves to our mind. We just need to understand how our mind works so that we can work out how to operate with it more effectively. And how do we do that? Well, when we're talking about frequency, if we really consciously reach for better feelings and we live them consistently and consciously, we can change our circumstances entirely. How do I know this? Because I've done it. When I realized I had the power to change my frequency, it was a complete game changer when it came to my anxiety. Something that had driven me and owned me for so long was suddenly something I realized I could do something about. This one realization changed everything, and it's really probably one of the big reasons I'm doing this podcast, because this change has made all of the difference in my life. It gave me the sense that I could do something about my anxiety, and something that I had felt so ashamed about for so long. For so much of my adult life, I had kept so much of myself hidden. I felt ashamed about my anxiety. I felt that I couldn't, my reactions to things were not like other people's reactions, and I needed to keep that part of myself hidden. And I also felt that I couldn't get any answers. I felt very stuck in my anxiety, and I felt quite resigned that I was going to have to live like this for the rest of my life. That was until I came across all of these concepts. And when I started seeing that I can change my frequency, I started to see that I could suddenly create my circumstances rather than being a victim to them. I saw that what I thought about myself would have a direct correlation on what was going on in my life. And these things together, all of these ideas coming together, the fact that I could choose my frequency, the fact that I was and am the creator of my reality, was the beginning of my big shift away from anxiety. So, anxiety relief, that's one of the things I really wanted to talk about in this episode. So, what were the key steps to me getting some anxiety relief? What did I do? So, firstly, I consciously changed my approach to myself. I stopped saying I was a sufferer of anxiety privately and publicly. And if people tried to put that label on me, close to me, I'd say, no, I'm no longer experiencing that. And yeah, sure, I might have been having anxiety feelings. I still get anxiety feelings today, but I stopped labeling myself. I changed my story that I was telling about myself, and I stopped putting that label on myself. And to me, that was a really big breakthrough. When I saw that by changing my frequency, changing my emotions, changing my thoughts, then everything changed. The second step was that I started to truly believe the words that this too shall pass. And I remember I had a very significant moment. I was having an anxiety attack, and a great therapist that I'd worked with had said to me, she said, it's about understanding that this too shall pass. But again, in this, those words had been words to me until, I don't know, somehow they trickled through my consciousness, and I remember I was sitting on my bed thinking, this anxiety is really, really not good. It's taking me into a really, really bad place. And I felt very, very overwhelmed, and that I was going to be completely overtaken by it. But somehow, in my consciousness that afternoon, those words, this too shall pass, managed to get through all of my skepticism, get through whatever barriers I'd put up. And I just took a breath, and I went, okay, I'm going to allow that idea to be real to me. I thought, okay, this too shall pass. And in that same moment, I started to really accept and allow my anxiety rather than pushing it away every time it came up. And again, it was that same therapist who said to me, this is paradoxical. You've got to allow it to be in your life rather than pushing it away. And then I started to use specific breathing techniques to start helping my nervous system to settle down when I was in the middle of an attack. So it was all of these things together, and it was a process that I had to just continually come back to. The big thing was that I was consistent, and I started sticking to this new idea that I was the one, that I was in control rather than my anxiety, and that if I could physically and think my way to a new place, then I could get to that new place. If I could change my frequency and keep it in a new place and keep that possibility alive, then I could come to a new place. So I really stuck to this approach day by day, week after week. And no matter how I was feeling, I stuck to my new approach. It was a journey and it took time, but it did work. And I need to be clear now here that I am a transformation coach. I do work with people with anxiety, but I'm not a psychologist. I'm just sharing here what worked for me. So I'd just like you to try some of this on for size alongside whatever you're doing right now with whoever you're working with. But the really good news here is that changing my frequency shifted a lot more than my anxiety. It actually gave me a whole new lease on my life, because I could see that there was this whole new landscape available to me. Once I saw that I'd taken this frequency shift in one place, that I could actually make some frequency shifts in lots of places. In fact, anywhere I wanted to change in my life, I learned if I shifted my frequency, and if I really, really did that, and there's a few steps within that, real miracles occurred for me. So I took it on, when I took this on board, when I had these frequency shifts, I really was able to change a lot of things. And I have to say that one of the other big shifts was around this idea that we are all part of a greater consciousness and that we create our reality. I've spoken a little bit about this today. If you want to know more about this, listen to episode 2 and 4 of this podcast. But when I really took on board this notion that I truly am a part of Source and I create my reality, everything started to shift in my personal relationships. By owning that I created my reality, I started to fully own my own stuff, where perhaps in my relationships, I thought I'd been a bit of a victim. And I could see, once with this shift, I could see where I had done things to others as well. And another part of this shift came when I stopped looking for love from others and instead started expressing love and giving love out. So rather than expecting to have it from others, I just flipped the switch on that and I started expressing love and giving love to others. What I found then, I suddenly had far deeper and much more authentic connections that were truly loving and real, not the fake connections that I think I'd had before. The other really fascinating thing about all of this was that shifting my frequency in all of these places meant that I had so much more energy because I was being real and authentic, and I was no longer building a facade around myself to protect myself. I was no longer fearing what other people thought of me. And when I dropped that facade, I suddenly had more energy because keeping up that facade, keeping up with how I thought people should think about me was very tiring and very exhausting. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, that you literally hold the power in your hands to change your life by constantly shifting your frequency. So there is a lot more to this story. I'd love you to stay tuned to the podcast. Today, I just wanted to focus on understanding these basics around our frequency and our vibration, and how understanding that our frequency can give us anxiety relief and so much more. So keep tuning in to Your Freedom Unlimited as I share much more about the other conscious shifts in frequency that we can make to live a happier, more free life, so we can get to where we want to go and we can get what matters most to us done. Until we speak again, please remember who you truly are and take great care. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Your Freedom Unlimited. If you like this show, please share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, subscribe, rate, and review Your Freedom Unlimited on your favourite podcast player. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you can reach me directly at jenramsey.com. Thanks for listening.